Okay, great. We're calling the meeting to order at 9 a.m. We will start with roll call, and I'll just go down. I am here. Gary? Liz?
Here.
Joe?
Here.
Jacqueline? Alex? Barb? Barb is not here. She is likely joining on the call, but can't be in person. Ellie? And Susan? Okay. We should also just make a note to fix Ellie's name on the letterhead. Okay, so just I'll say a few words to get this meeting started. It's a special meeting focused on the Hawthorns Area Trails proposal. It's awesome to see some folks in person here from the community. How many? It looks like we have 4 people on the Zoom call. Howard, is that correct?
The other one is the Zoom room itself.
Okay.
And the historic schoolhouse.
So we've got 2 folks. We are going to have oral communications from the public. It's for items not on the agenda. So if you want to talk about things that are on the agenda specific there, you can wait till that time. But if you want to say something just about the Hawthorns, I think we've got a small enough number of people that we can do that. We will ask people to keep their comments focused on trails. This is not an all-up Hawthorns meeting. This is a meeting about trails. So if you have concerns that are not specific to the trails, there are other forums for those. We want to keep this meeting as efficient as possible. This is a special meeting. All of our everyone here is a volunteer, well, except Howard. But he works a lot of hours too, and we want to make good use of everyone's time. We will be back here next Wednesday, and this will be on our agenda again next Wednesday. That agenda will come out shortly. So let's just, I want to keep focused and make good use of everyone's time and have a productive meeting. So with that, we will go to oral communications, and I think we'll start with folks who are here in person. If anybody wants to come up, and we go to that thing, or go to the lectern, I guess, if anyone would like to come to the lectern and make a statement for 2 to 3 minutes. Going once, going twice. Yeah, Dave, come on. You will have a chance to comment when items are on the agenda.
Oh, you want to do it later?
No, you can do it.
Items not on the
Not-
agenda.
Hi, folks.
Hey,
Thanks
Dave.
for seeing me.
This-
I'll come back in a minute.
Okay. Dave has, for those of you who don't know, Dave has been volunteering his time to help out with our town map, and that will be on our agenda next week. So we thanked him before, but thank you again. Okay, anyone on the Zoom call, looks like we've got a couple more folks who would like to make a statement about something not on the agenda. And again, for folks who are just joining us, we are focused on the Hawthorns Trail proposal, and we are asking people to keep their comments focused on trail specific issues. Any hands raised? Okay, if you can please just say your name so we have it for the records, do that up front, and then we'll start 2 minutes when you start talking. We're not hearing anything. Howard, I can't see if you can see whether or not they're talking. I guess it's a phone.
No, the person's still on mute. If you can unmute yourself.
Okay. Let's go ahead and move forward then. If any other hands up?
My hand is raised. My name is Caroline Vertonghen.
Okay, go ahead, Caroline.
Thank you. Caroline Vertonghen. I'm not only a resident, but I'm also a member of PPDS. Our next emergency meeting is also on the 17th of October. It's also to discuss Hawthorns, and you're more than welcome to join us. It's at 7 o'clock. I know it's not on the agenda, but I hope we can keep it as an ongoing business Sosol Trail, Palmer Trail. There's some new development there, and I would like to understand what's going on there. Hillbrook Trail and safe routes to school. Hope we will have an update on that soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline.
No other hands up.
Okay, all right, let's move into our primary business for the day. So we're talking about the Hawthorns area trail proposal. We've structured this to focus on 3 specific topics, and then we're making room for other ideas from the committee. We will also cover the impact that parking may have on trails, and then have a discussion of whether or not we want to form a subcommittee to help us move forward. I'll give a little bit of context for the order of operations of things that are happening. So there is a public access working group meeting on October 26th that I think we've covered a lot in this forum. That is one of a series of meetings that the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District is having on how to develop the Hawthorns area. It is the meeting where designs for trails will be discussed. Now, it's not the final end all be all meeting, but it is very important that we get our perspective in, because those designs will frame how everything gets developed going forward. So there is a town ad hoc committee of chairs of committees that has met. It's a non-Brown Act committee, but that is preparing perspectives from the town for what we would like to see developed at the Hawthorns property. I am on that committee representing trails. And one of the things that is important for us to do is to have this committee represented in terms of what our priorities are, what we think is important to have in the plan for developing trails at Hawthorns. So our focus today is in preparing to ultimately have a written perspective from our committee, assuming everyone is aligned with that. Well, we will vote on that. Shared through that channel that will get into the agenda for the October 26th public access working group meeting for Hawthorns. Does anybody have any questions just on that, on the order of operations?
I do. So do you envision a document of the trail committee's perspective and a document of the ad hoc committee of committees?
The committee of committees,
Same thing.
they'll be the same thing. We're not going to adjudicate within the committee of what the trails perspective is. We will have the
That would be-
trails committee.
Gotcha.
Yep. Any other questions about that? Okay, great. So let's talk about Alpine Trail improvements. I've talked a lot, but I will frame up this discussion, but then open it up for public. If you want to come talk about this, please come up. People on Zoom, please raise your hand. I believe it's our committee's joint perspective, or at least I'll offer a perspective that we would like to see the Alpine Trail. So I'm talking about the trail as it starts from the southern edge of the Hawthorns property, roughly at the intersection of Saddleback and Alpine, continuing north to roughly Firethorn and Alpine Road. We would like to see that trail improved in a couple of significant ways. One is making it multi-use, so widening it so that we can have, in particular, children on bikes, being able to commute down Alpine Road safely, staying on the eastern side of Alpine Road as they continue north on Alpine Road in the direction of Alpine Hills. So that would mean widening the trail and likely also moving it east on the land away from the road. There's I think an open question of where the fence goes. I think we would like to make sure that that trail is accessible beyond the hours that the Windy Hill Preserve is typically open. So Windy Hill is likely those rules are going to govern the Hawthorns. It is open, I believe, from 30 minutes, maybe it's dawn until 30 minutes. Yeah, sunrise to sunset, roughly speaking. And obviously we want people to be able to travel on that on bike beyond those times. So that may mean moving that fence inward or away from the road, rather eastward, so that the trail can be accessible 24 hours a day. So with that, are there any modifications, any comments that people would like to issue?
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
I'd like to just throw out on the table, not even having a fence.
I think that's fine. I don't know that that's a trail specific decision. I understand that the fence is there primarily to keep the wildlife from crossing onto Alpine Road, jumping down from that height. And so I think that's a non-trails question.
So maybe we don't comment on the fence at all.
I think maybe we comment on, we would like the trail to be accessible 24 hours a day. I think it would be the way to frame it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think a big piece of that, it needs to be accessible, and it also it's that you want it to be continuous, right? So you want it to be as smooth as you're coming from Alpine Trail on the two other ends. You want to just feel like it's continuous, not like you're entering a new section right there. Like my kids bike to school every day, and right at that Portola Road, right, they cross at the Portola Alpine intersection, and that's where they currently hop on to the existing Alpine Trail. So I think that's obviously an important point, that there's a lot of kids that need to be able to just seamlessly get on the trail right there.
Yeah.
So just in general, yeah, making sure it is continuous on the two ends where it leaves the Hawthorns onto the rest of our Portola Valley Trail.
Yeah, makes sense. Gary?
Yeah, so to Liz's point about fences, it is a scenic corridor, and we don't want a lot of large corrugated metal type fences. We do allow, however, split rail, kind of horse type fences, they're called. And I walked the trail. I ridden my horse on the trail recently. I've been up and down a number of times thinking about how this could work. The problem that we're trying to solve is that, at least from the equestrian perspective and the bicycle perspective, is that we need the trail wider so they can safely pass each other. But we're also trying to solve the problem where either a bike or a horse would go off the cliff down into Alpine Road. So when they cross each other, there's pressure, there's tension, right? The bike's putting pressure on the horse to go whatever opposite direction, and the same thing with the horse and the bike. So I thought maybe they could take the corrugated fence that they have now and just move it way in, move it out of sight, even if they could. I don't know. That would certainly be favorable to Conservation Committee and the scenic corridor, but put a split rail fence between the trail and Alpine Road, particularly in the areas across from Roberts, where it's steep, and across from Nat Horse, which is actually the steepest part, is when it's across from Nat Horse. A split rail fence, which I think would be okay with conservation. I don't know, we have to ask. And then widen the trail, and then push the other fence in as far as it can go, and you've solved those problems. It's going to require a little bit of grading because you're cutting into the hillside there. But you can see what happened with the old fence. Over the years, the dirt is kind of piled up against it and created a little ridge there, right? If you took that fence out and you cut that ridge back, you could get, I think, easily a 10-foot trail in there. There's one or two trees, it'd be a little tight, but and then you don't have to move the trail, right? We don't have to split anything. We don't have to go off. And we solve the two primary problems. One, you have a split rail fence between the trail and the road, no one's going to go over the cliff. And if the interior fence is pushed far enough away, the tension between a horse and a bike will get resolved by someone going into the Hawthorne's property and not towards Alpine Road.
So perhaps then in our proposal, we can say that we think that fencing could be both moved eastward to improve the safety of the multi-use, to make multi-use more feasible, but then also additional fencing could be used along I think what you're saying is closer to the road to prevent people from going
Between the trail and the road.
between the trail and the road. That could be an option.
And it wouldn't have to be the entire length of the trail. I think it would only have to be sections where it's steep.
Yeah,
You
so
know, it
in,
goes
as
up and down.
a safety measure, so to speak. Yeah, I think that's a reasonable.
And I don't know how specific we can be in our recommendations, but you know, that fence is not optional, but the other fence is optional and they can move it wherever they, or take it out altogether. I mean,
Yeah.
it really doesn't matter. Yeah. And then there's one other construction element that we should probably add to this, and that is wherever they place their driveway, the trail has to be reconstructed so that it comes into the driveway level. So you don't have an incline on either side of the driveway, because if you're riding your bike and you're picking up speed as you're going into a driveway and someone's turning in there, it's a recipe for disaster. So we did this over there at the emergency entrance at the school, and I know Howard's looked at this on every project we've done, but just for our purposes, that has to be a level approach to wherever they put the driveway or driveways.
So that's a good call out, is ensuring that the driveways, maybe only driveway, hopefully, do not create slope up and down on either side of the trail. Joe, yeah.
Before Gary spoke, I was convinced of this other thought, and I'm changing my thought, even though I'm going to share it with you. And I do like what Gary's proposal is better. My thought was, even though money is, it could be an issue, is that what if we excavated in about 10, 12 feet and then had the trail just on the road level? Was I thinking that, but that might require a retaining wall that's $5 million, but don't know about that.
Yeah, that's interesting. That seems complicated.
So simply, you just cut a bunch of dirt away.
A lot of awful.
Okay.
It's a thought. It's
Yeah,
a thought. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's another idea we could share as potentially an option. I think the general idea is still, it's consistent with the general idea of multi-use, making it usable for more types of transport. Helen, did you want to come up and?
My name's Helen Quinn. I am actually a member of the PORC. I also a resident of Portola Valley. This is a personal opinion, not a PORC opinion, but the issue, I think, will be land ownership and easements. So the fence you suggested would be on town land, the one that's on the road side of the trail. The trail will be partially on open space land. So I think there needs to be a trail agreement easement arrangement. And if the town suggests willingness to make some accommodations for that easement, I think, I mean, from what I've heard, this is an expected thing, the Alpine Trail movement, and it can even go behind some of the trees a little further up, making it a more attractive trail as well as a safer one. So thinking about that more broadly than just, oh, we'll widen the existing trail and put a fence along it, you can move the trail back a little, I think. And as far as I heard in the discussions from Mid-Penn at our field trip, they're already expecting to do that, to move it somewhat further back from the road. So I think you shouldn't be timid in asking for what you're what you really want there to make a good trail. But I think the point about the driveways is an important one, because currently it's not that way at the driveway.
Thank you.
I thought Mid-Penn also, maybe Jackie said this last time when she attended the meetings. They also asked who was going to pay for this. So.
Yeah, I mean, I can just add in two things. So first of all, as far as the location, like if you were to drive by right now, when we walked it, it's like tilled up, there's a pretty wide section. I mean, that's where I think it was discussed, like moving a good bit so that it's just not even anywhere near the road or the slope. So it was talked about moving it a good bit in, and not just being a pretty like meandering, even like going around some trees, removing as few trees as possible to. And I mean, I think that is doable and you can still connect. You just have to think through those connection points, because if it's like right by where that Firethorn trail is, like that's a pretty easy place that you just dump out and can either go on Firethorn or continue in front of the houses on Alpine. And then it's more this may require some of us walking it if we're going to make a true suggestion. It's like around Portola Road, similarly. Anyway, I think there is a way that you can, I appreciate the suggestion of possibly an extra fence, but I also think you can just get it a good bit away from the road and still have it connect fine. And then, yes, it was brought up like long-term, if this is going to be something that's 24/7 access, it was, well, then ultimately is this turn into a town trail? Is it granted to the town? And this is not the Hawthorne's Trail even, but then that also brings up the conversation of, well, then who's even actually doing this work? And constructing the trail. And I guess the one positive, is there any chance it could happen faster if we took ownership? But then there's lots of.
So in terms of the purpose of what we want to get accomplished to put in the proposal for 16 days from 15 days from now, I would recommend we table sort of the legal mechanics of how we do this, because I don't know that we have the right expertise to make a strong recommendation, other than we should potentially follow up with Judith, who is our town council liaison, and maybe the town attorney. Howard, would that make sense to sort of get, as we dig into the practicalities of how we might want our vision to actually be executed?
Yeah, that's correct. I think we should ask the council liaison and get advice from the town attorney too. And once again, this is because the town hasn't received a formal submittal from MROSD. But once again, this is the practice in voicing your opinions as residents to MROSD is important right now.
Hi,
Hi.
Karen Vatra, also a POG member. I just want to clarify a little bit about the fence. From my understanding, from what I've heard, is that the fence is historic, not historical, but it was put there by the former owner, and their Mid-Penn is not set on keeping it. So that just a informational content. My second comment is probably more relevant to what you propose and what Portola Valley considers multi-use is slightly different than Mid-Penn. Mid-Penn prohibits e-bikes, and I know I've seen a lot of kids with e-bikes, so that probably should be part of the recommendation, that that would also be permitted on this trail.
That's a great suggestion.
Yeah, if I may go back, well, that's a great point. And e-bikes are currently prohibited on town trails. Anything with a motor is prohibited on town trails currently. Yep. So I know there's a few youngsters taking advantage of that, but they're not supposed to. But anyway, I digress. To your point about the structural, how we're going to build this thing in easements, my proposal, one of the reasons I focused on that was to try to avoid this whole problem of Mid-Penn granting or not granting the town a trail easement on their land. My guess is they won't, or they can't. So if the trail varies outside of the road right-of-way easement, it now becomes a Mid-Penn trail, subject to Mid-Penn rules, subject to Mid-Penn enforcements. They can close the trail at night, so on. Nothing we can do about it. So it gets further complicated that we don't know if the trail exists on Mid-Penn land today in some places. It might, because the road, does that road right-of-way easement start from the middle of the road or the edge of the road? Do you know, Howard, off the top of your head?
Off the top of my head, no. I suspect it's close to the fence line. The right of way ends close to the fence line.
So,
Right. So while it would be nice to punt on this stuff, it is pretty material in terms of what our recommendations would be, because one way we'd be recommending that Mid-Penn own the trail, and the other way we'd be recommending that we hope the town could still own the trail. We'd have to do the engineering to see where the road right-of-way easement ends.
So maybe one thing we could add to this is, I think what you're saying is in part, let's try to get this done as quickly as possible. And so maybe we actually also include that in our perspective, is we encourage Mid-Penn and the town to work together on the sort of legal mechanics of how to make this happen sooner rather than later, given how critical it is to getting a safe route to school for our town.
Right. Even if they can give us constraints that we know we'll have to deal with,
yeah,
whatever those might be. I think Mid-Penn can still do any trail they want on their property, even if we preserved Alpine Trail as a town trail and it's relatively same location. It'd be great if they did away with the fence altogether, but that's up to them. I'm convinced that if we want to get this done quickly, if we move Alpine Trail out into Mid-Penn land, we've got a lot more things we have to do to accomplish, that trail becoming viable. And if Mid-Penn will not grant us an easement, then we have to be okay with giving up a trail forever to Mid-Penn.
Okay.
I want to go back to my thought, and I just now even thought about this. We see so many communities changing the use of the roads and putting in the blue or the green bicycle trail markings, and even using the roads for the restaurants at all. So there is a change in our community and our philosophy of how a road is to be used. Getting into the road and making it simple with the safety factor in there, you can even put posts that you can divide and make it much more clear that cars aren't supposed to get over there. I'm really feeling strongly about that if that's a feasible option.
Say again, the idea of getting rid of the dirt and moving.
Well,
like,
it wouldn't
create a
necessarily
lane?
make it a bike lane, but also a multi-purpose lane, just like the entrances to the freeways now, where they make it clear that where bikes may be so the cars can see them. And it wouldn't require moving 10 or 15 feet of soil. It would mean restriping the road and probably moving it a little bit to the left, just like we did down by the freeway.
Are you saying, okay, let's do a bike lane on the
On the road.
road and then pedestrian, equestrian up higher?
I wasn't thinking that. I was thinking multi-use the whole thing.
Horses on the road?
No, but
Horses
maybe,
up in the top.
yeah, maybe we can just share with BPTNS the idea of making the road clearer as part of this entire project. Dave.
Hello. Okay, so in terms of addressing the temporal access as multi-use of the transportation corridor, it seems like the working assumption is that a new trail on the Hawthorne's space would supersede and replace the existing Alpine Trail. And I wonder if you can have an EPK, right, where you advocate for a Mid-Penn owned multi-use trail that has standard access hours and standard rules, then also maintain the existing town trail for foot access, right? And so, yes, the bicycles would probably lose then like dark time transport on off-road, but like my kid is not going to school in the dark, right? He's not going to soccer practice in the dark. My 9-year-old is transporting himself independently along that corridor right now as safely as able, but that's during daylight hours. So I wonder if we can separate those things and allow people who want to recreate kind of off hours at safety, and then bicycles can just use the shoulder during the off hours.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So I think just to summarize, maybe decoupling the bicycle transport, the multi-use transport along the corridor from Alpine Trail specifically is what you're saying, is keep Alpine Trail as it is, but also part of the new trail network that they're proposing putting in, fulfill this need. And that way we can skirt maybe some of these issues. So I think this is just another sort of push for urging the community to be creative in the solutions and be as expeditious, I guess, as it can be in getting this done.
To Dave's proposal, we should ask Mid-Penn if they would allow us to have one of their trails on our safe routes to school map.
Yeah, that's a great.
Because that's kind of would be a gating factor for doing something like that. But yeah, I mean, I think that's always been an option, and including with the proposal I made, Mid-Penn can still do any trail that they want. And when we get to talk about the trails, maybe we can talk about some additional trails besides just the loop there and how that might work. So.
Yeah. So let's also just note that for our request that we would like, should Mid-Penn create trails that could be used in our safe routes to school, that we would like to request permission for that as part of this. Okay, any other comments on Alpine Trail? The next item is overall new trails. Howard, do we have any hands up?
Yes, there are 2 hands up. We will take 3 hands up. We will take Karen Askey first.
Hi, good morning. I'm glad you guys are having this discussion. I think it's awesome. I'm on the ad hoc committee representing Parks and Recreation, and there's a tremendous amount of documentation that MidPen has put out. And I just, to reiterate what Karen Botridge said, I do think that chain link fence is not a necessity to MidPen. And my recommendation to your committee is that you put together your ultimate wish list or preferences, so that one of those things could be that that fence is removed, right? And that you just put the split rail fence on. The other thing I wanted to point out that there's a conservation easement when the land was gifted to MidPen, and it's got a lot of prohibitions, some uses and prohibitions. One of those is, it says alteration of landforms by grading or excavation. That's very broad, but I think we should ask for what we want, and then MidPen can see if they can do it. But this is the time to put together the ultimate preferences of what we want and then see if it can get done. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Karen. All right. Well, I will stand corrected from your suggestion earlier, Liz. Let's ask to remove the fence. Next.
Okay. Next is Christy Corley.
Hi, Christy.
Hello. Yeah, I also am interested in getting rid of the chain link fence and getting a new type of fence, whether it be double rail or whatever you all decide. I do think as part of a negotiation that we could ask for improvements on the trail outside the fence, since they're going to be doing a lot on the inside. There's going to be many things that we give concessions for and ask for things back, and possibly, improvement of the fence in front of their property is an ask as well. So if there was a fence, we want the trail improved on the outside of the fence for us, and then they will also have to have a trail on the inside, and we don't want our trail to be locking at any time, would be my request. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Who's next, Howard?
Okay. Phone number 650-678. Go ahead.
Thank you so
Carolyn,
much.
is
Can
this-
you hear me? Yes, it's me.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. So thank you for this discussion and all the great conversations and solutions. It's wonderful. And I hope you will come to the BPTS meeting because one of the issues is our roads are not safe for bikes, especially the little ones. And so that's why we have allowed youngsters to use the trails to commute by bike. We can change that by making our roads safer, and that's our goal. So come. There's another issue, especially because you talked about the Hawthorne Hill or that trail that goes up to Spring Ridge Trail. And there's a lot, so this is in regards to the stormwater drainage.
So, hey, Caroline,
yes.
Just to clarify, the Spring Ridge Trail is on the Windy Hill. Are you talking about the Sweet Springs Trail, the intersection of Sweet Springs and Alpine Trail?
Well, it's part, in the winter, we get water that goes into Saddleback Road, and
Yep,
that's part of the trail.
That's Sweet Springs Trail.
Okay, so we want to make sure that the water drainage is taken care of, and we should start this winter because in the past winter, it affected our trails and our roads, and it shouldn't. So this is another issue that we have to take care of, and not wait until Hawthorne develops its project. This is something that is going on now and should be done now.
Okay.
Before
hey,
winter
Caroline,
starts. Thank you.
I'm gonna request that you make that request to the town. That is I'm not specific to the Hawthorne Trails development that we're talking about now, but I do think it's a very valid, important thing that the town does need to look after. But I just want to make sure we keep our discussion here focused on the Hawthorns and the trails. in
PV
Hawthorns. PV Connect also is another great place to do that.
Actually, that trail is getting washed out by the water coming down from Hawthorns. It's coming down Sweet Springs Trail. So how do we get them to capture the water and not ruin our trails of Portola Valley?
Yep, these are issues that are related to Hawthorns, important issues related to Hawthorns, but I want to keep our discussion focused. Right now, we're talking about the development of the Alpine Trail improvements.
Okay, one other
Wait,
thing.
I have, can I just comment, Christy? Fred, where would we direct Christy and Caroline for those comments for the committee of committees? Which committee would put that in their request?
I'm not sure that it's, I would send it to Howard, a request to manage the storm potential damage on Sweet Springs Trail. If there's an issue with Hawthorns, I trust Howard to engage with Mid-Penn on how to deal with
I
that.
guess what I'm hearing is for the future trail development, could the town's document recommendation to Mid-Penn that we're all working on, it's going to be a big one that trails will be part of, which, what other section would include future worry or whatever about storm damage on future trails on Hawthorne that impact, I'm just trying to direct them, because I don't think that goes on PV Connect, that goes for current trails like the Sweet Spring thing. But what I'm hearing is for this development, where does that go?
Go ahead, Howard.
There's two parts to that question. The first thing is like, as Fred said, if there's a current problem right now being caused by specific drainage, that should go on the PV Connect, or they can email me and we can address that. Secondly, for any trails that are being developed, once that proposal comes in, the town looks at it technically also. However, that doesn't bar you, the Trails Committee, from putting some note down there that says something watch for drainage in this area. So I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah, I think that these are important points in terms of how things develop in managing the storms. We had unprecedented storms last year. Well, maybe not unprecedented, but unusual storms last year.
But Sweet Springs is also a very steep trail.
Yep.
So some of the problems may be caused from Hawthorne, but I think also the fact it's a very steep trail and the water just careens down it, because I've been up it many times.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Ellie. That's a great point. I do have an email from one of the members of the public. I just wanted to read here. This is from Rami Krasinski. He has several comments on Hawthorns, but one of them is related to Alpine Road. So I'll read his whole email here, just so we have it into sort of the record. It's exciting to have the Hawthorns property become a new public access space in Portola Valley. As a relatively small preserve, I feel that its value will primarily be to better connect existing trails, provide additional parking for open space access, and augment recreational facilities for the region. I would specifically like to see these uses prioritized. Number one, relevant to here, is provide a safe biking route along Alpine Road. This could be a paved path following the inside of the existing fence with attention to providing a safe crossing of the Hawthorns driveway. This would be great for general access to the preserve, as well as for kids traveling down Alpine from Corte Madera. I'll read the rest here. Number two, connect Los Trancos Trail to Valley Oak Trail. This path can utilize the existing gravel road on the property and should not require much more than opening the gates on Los Trancos Road. Number three, connect internally to Sweet Springs Trail. Number four, provide ample parking. This area can provide an alternative access point to the Coal Mine Ridge Trail system, as there are many approximate 5 to 6 mile loop options. To that end, it would be convenient to have parking near Valley Oak Trail. 5, provide an off-leash dog park and or off-leash trails access for dogs. And 6, provide facilities such as picnic tables sufficient for large group use. So just want to note, we have another sort of in favor of, personally in favor of a safe route along Alpine Road. I personally am not in favor of paving.
Yeah, you
but,
can't pave it.
But I think that the general sentiment is important. Okay. Anyone else with hands raised, or we can move forward to new trail use?
I have one more comment that I learned that was interesting. When we were going to put the trail inside the fence, they were, MidPen was concerned about liability because it now becomes their problem. So if we solve it in a way where it's not their problem and it's still our trail, then I think that relieves them from what I took away from one of the meetings.
Yeah, I think that that's a great point to make, and I think connects to the point that Dave made earlier about decoupling these and potentially having two trails that address this issue. Okay, let's move on to.
Fred,
Oh, go ahead, Karen.
I'm sorry. It's Karen Askey. I've had my hand up, but I'm on Zoom, so you can't see me. I just want to go back to the comment about the Sweet Springs Trail. And this is a process comment, I guess I'm thinking about, is that I think the ad hoc committee should actually put that in our summary of our preferences and concerns so that it's there and it's in writing. And I mean, I'm happy to take it on if we want just presenting the committee, or if Trails wants to just write up that as MidPen is working on the development, that they pay careful consideration and perhaps help with the flooding that occurs on Sweet Springs Trail from the MidPen property. But I think we should definitely mention it. And I'm happy to work with someone on the wording on that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Karen.
You know, I think it's worth pointing out that what the ad hoc committee and what this committee recommends to Hawthorns is not the end of the story. So when they come back with the permit to implement all this, it goes through the town and through the town's engineer. And so they will look at things like drainage. The town will not let them build a trail that is draining onto an existing trail. It's just not going to happen. I have no problem with including those comments in there, but the public should know, the committee should know that there will be a whole nother set of eyes looking at this from an engineering perspective after they've created their master plan to submit to the town.
Yeah, so maybe we just have a comment in our recommendation to encourage throughout the course of the development of this to be mindful of impact to existing trails. I think that might be an omnibus statement to cover these kinds of issues. Okay, let's move on to new trail use, length, features, so on and so forth. So there have been some proposals. I don't actually have the proposals. Maybe Helen, you want to come up and talk about them. I don't know how we'll enter the map. I could, I guess, put it in front of my face.
Helen Quinn again. This is just a conceptual map, so it's going to be altered in multiple ways. Actually, I would like to make a comment to the previous conversation, if I may.
Yes.
As a previous chair of this committee, some 15 years ago, the section of Sweet Springs Trail from Alpine Road to the top of the hill is an inadequate trail. It's too steep, and as you say, it has drainage problems. The idea when that trail was put in was that eventually when the Hawthorns property became accessible for trail changes, it would be abandoned and replaced by a trail on Hawthorns land. And I think you should seriously think about that question. Without that trail could easily be replaced by entering the Hawthorns property at the top of the hill and coming down to the corner of Portola Road, linking into the network there. So that's a possibility I suggest you think about. And that's just me speaking, got nothing to do with my role on board. It is true, and I think this is a place where this committee needs to speak for the town in general. The Portola Valley Ranch Homeowners Association is asking not to have any connection of Sweet Springs Trail to.
Well,
this.
some members of the Portola Valley Ranch Association are
Well,
not asking.
the
for that.
homeowners association itself has sent a letter. I mean, obviously there are people in the ranch who think either way.
Yeah.
Because you've got two of them here.
Yes.
Have they
Anyway,
sent a letter to
but-
this committee?
So thinking about abandoning a piece of trail as part of the strategy, because it is an inadequate piece of trail,
Yeah.
I think is important.
Gary, to your question, I don't believe that they have sent a letter.
Yeah, we haven't seen your letter, Helen.
It's not.
It was not sent to
Oh,
you,
I'm
it
sorry.
was sent to Midpen.
It was sent to Minpen. Okay, so you're not asking us to make those considerations then?
I'm asking you to think about what is best for the town trail system.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah, so I know that there are varying opinions within Portola Ranch Association. I live in.
But isn't one of the main considerations, is the fact that they do not allow bicycles on their trails? And Midpen is having this as a multi-use trail inside the Hawthorns.
Just hang on a sec. The trail, Sweet Springs Trail, is not a ranch trail. It is a PV town trail. Bikes are technically not allowed on it, but it is a PV town trail, so that is under the governance of the town. And this committee, I do not believe, has received, at least not in the last, since you and I have chaired it, so the last, what, 5 years? 5 years. Has not received a letter from the ranch. The ranch may have sent a letter to Midpen about not advocating for a connection. We will talk, I have slated on here to talk about connections to existing trail networks, so I do want to come back to that. I guess maybe we can blend 2 and 3 together here. I'll maybe start framing up the new trails discussion. So there is a map. Actually, maybe I can just kind of, Joe, will you pass it down and I will actually literally put it in front of my face. So
Yes.
those
Pass it
folks who
down.
are on Zoom can have an idea of what it looks like. Okay, I don't know that this will zoom in really well. It doesn't really. So I'll use just my fingers to kind of trace it. This is the northern, or excuse me, southern edge, I believe, of
No.
right? Northern. Excuse me, the northern. So yeah, sorry. All right, so this is Firethorn up here, and down here is Saddleback right here to orient people. And so there's a red line, and I'm just going to trace my finger kind of along, kind of meanders along, does a loop around like that. Okay, so for those of you watching along at home, that's your view. For those of you, we'll pass it along. People can take a look at it. I'll describe it just maybe in words a little bit here. So what they have is an entrance. The sort of connection to Alpine Road starts at right near Firethorn, and then it meanders up along Alpine Road, and then loops. Once it gets close to the boundary, the existing boundary of, well, it's still the boundary of the Hawthorne's property near Saddleback. It does a roughly 180-degree turn back towards back north, and then after it gets a third of the way up the property, then it heads east, and then there we go. Look at that, wonderful. Craig Sander, thank you very much. Craig, we'll get to your hand in just a second. There you can see the proposal. That's great. Craig, since your hand is up and I can actually see that your hand's up, why don't you, maybe you can shed light on any letter that's been sent from
Yes,
the ranch.
Thank you. One thing, let me correct one thing that you stated as well, Fred. Sweet Springs Trail is owned by Portola Valley Ranch. They gave when the ranch was formed, they provided a non-exclusive easement to the town. Any changes to that area would require both the town and the owner, which is still Portola Valley Ranch, to agree to those changes, because the land isn't really town land. It is a town trail, designated as a town trail, because the town has an easement there. So there is a subtle but important legal distinction around that.
Fair point. Thank you.
And with regard to the letter, I'd be happy to share that with this committee. It was a letter that was sent to Mid-Penn when Hawthorne's was kind of, it was in 2001 when it was sent to Mid-Penn. I'll send that to you, Fred, and then you can distribute it to others if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry, did you say 2001?
Yes, September of 2001
Okay.
is when and that was approved by like was said before, there are a variety of opinions of ranch owners, homeowners, particularly those that have a view of the area and those that are around office of the roads that connect almost directly there. They're worried about parking issues and also travel through areas where they're not open to the public, and further incursion with dogs and bikes and things in areas where they're not allowed. So those are the major concerns. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you, Greg.
Fred,
So-
I have a concern since we combined 2 and 3.
Mhm.
No, that red line does not connect down by Saddleback.
Yep.
And I want to register my concern, and I think the committee should consider putting that in our recommendation, that we want a connection.
Yeah. So I'll go Gary and then I'll come back. I agree with you.
Okay, so when it comes to laying out new trails on the Hawthorns, the trails and paths element had a forward-looking diagram that was done by some of the original architects of our trail system that put the proposed trails on the Hawthorns on this map. So I don't know if the working group has seen the trails and paths element, but there was already some thought put into how the trails would get laid out there. I don't know that this has any teeth, that it might be nothing more than advisory to Mid-Penn. But the architects of our trail system knew that land and gave it a lot of thought and proposed some trails there. So I think that needs to be brought up and looked at. Also in the trails and paths element, this is a part of the town's general plan for those who might not know. It calls out how the trail system's supposed to function in terms of intersections, in terms of multiple options for different categories of users. And so we would want to weigh any proposal from Mid-Penn against what is spelled out in our trails and paths element. I'm not sure if any of that work has been done yet. And if you look at the trails and paths element where they laid out the trails, interconnections were very important to them. So they not only did they not suggest moving Sweet Springs Trail, they suggested connecting into it at a point where I believe Mid-Penn already has an easement across ranch property.
Yeah.
I've looked at that. So I think those things need to be taken into consideration when we look at what Mid-Penn can do without any legal or otherwise permission from the town. Mid-Penn already has an easement connecting into the ranch.
No, they
It
don't.
exists today.
They do not, Gary.
Yes,
Gary,
they
I'm
do.
sorry.
hey,
Send it
folks,
to me then.
This is
I will email it to you, Craig.
Yeah.
This is a matter of fact, not of opinion. So I think we can figure out what the right fact
Or
is.
Howard can weigh in on it.
So
You
we
don't
can.
have me. But my point is that as we look at trails being laid out on Hawthorns, we should give special considerations to the parts of the general plan that dictate this. We should give considerations to this diagram where the original architects thought the trail should go. And if you look at that, it does include intersections. It includes Sweet Springs. It includes Los Trancos.
Yeah.
It includes Firethorn. So I would ask everybody to review that, and perhaps that's a good starting point.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, it's on the town's website.
Can you
It's part of the Trails and Paths general element.
Sure.
can you
Yeah.
log into the Zoom on your
I
laptop?
can't, but somebody else can.
Okay. I'll see if I can do it. Howard, you want to try?
I know it's hard to see.
So I think that the key point there is making sure that we bring in the trails and paths element. You know, we've done that multiple times. Ellie and Susan, I think, and I, when we were trying to preserve the Frog Pond Park. we use the trails and paths element as a key guide to that. So I think making sure we bring in the trails and paths element, I mean, there are many lands that have trails marked out that have not yet been developed that we have looked at, and they did a pretty good job mapping them out based on what I've reviewed on foot. So let's bring that in. I think we have other folks commenting on this, and I think our general perspective should be in support of the trails and paths element and making as many connections as we can. I do acknowledge that there are concerns from the folks who live in that part of the ranch. Nobody wants a bunch of cars parking on Saddleback. I don't think anybody wants that. I think that there are ways to, or on Valley Oak, I think there are ways to make these connections facilitate trail use and not invite a bunch of cars. For one, I think the connection to Sweet Springs, I believe the easement that you're referencing, Gary, is at the end of Pomponio, if I'm not mistaken. Which is far enough up from, it's the top of the hill, so it addresses the ability to connect down into Alpine. I would not advocate for abandoning Sweet Springs. I would like both, but I think making that connection would make sense. And that would not invite the parking issues. I mean, the ranch already has potential for parking issues with Coal Mine Ridge and the ranch house, which do not seem to have materialized based on my personal experience. And we haven't had anyone, any significant complaints about that. So I think the connection both to Sweet Springs, and then folks have also mentioned Los Trancos. I'll get to your comment just a sec, Gary. I've got two public comments just on Los Trancos. The first is from Andy Coy and reads as follows: as you finalize the trail design for this property, I strongly urge you to consider building a connector from Alpine Trail to Los Trancos Trail through the property adjacent to Los Trancos Road. There are too many pedestrians on that stretch of Los Trancos Road with no shoulder, and this would make the road much safer for everyone. In addition, lots of people start their run exercising from Alpine Hills Club, and this would provide a much better pathway for them to get directly to the Los Trancos trail system without running alongside the road to get there. Thanks so much for your consideration. Let me know if you have any questions. So just so folks, just to orient people too on this one, Los Trancos is sort of one of them. It's probably the most unfortunate trail, at least in my perspective, in our town, in that it starts and then it runs into the border of the town and stops, and then you have to go along Los Trancos Road, and then it starts back up again. And it's a wonderful trail, it connects up into Coal Mine Ridge. But that break right there is quite unfortunate, and the Hawthorne's property represents probably the only way to make that connection. And so, yeah, Helen, can you come up to the...
Currently, Mid-Penn has blocked off the 9 acres along the creek as a separate study. Your input can be that the committee charged with dealing with that section needs to also consider trails and paths, parking, et cetera, public access, not just the historic element.
Yep, that's a great point. That's a great point. So there is part of the Hawthorne's property that is not being considered for development at this point, I think is the point you're raising, and we should make sure that trails and paths gets in there. I'll read another comment on this particular point. Again, this is from Ian Bratt. I would like to request a connector from Alpine Trail to Los Trancos Trail. This would make the Los Trancos Trail much more accessible and avoid the unsafe scenario of individuals who embark on Los Trancos Trail only to find that they must then navigate a dangerous road with minimal shoulder. Additionally, I don't think my neighbor's lighting is dark. Sorry, the second point is actually trolling me. I hadn't read that. So thank you, Ian. We'll stop the comment there.
I think it's 13 acres, just to clarify, 13 acres is taken away from the 79.
Okay, thank you. I had Gary and then Howard, or you guys can
Right,
just
so
decide the order.
the point about parking, the general plan addresses that as well. The general plan is trails and paths element is against placing parking at trailheads, and it does not expect that to happen. So I think the Trails and Paths Committee should be very supportive of that. I know I am. When it comes to talking about parking at the Hawthorns in general, we can get a little more specific. But when it comes to parking at trailheads, whether they're an interconnection or whatnot, there should be no parking or very, very little,
Great. That's
as supported by the Trails and Paths element.
yeah, I think that's a really important point for this committee to bring up. I'll just say, I think that parking spaces invite cars. And as we've seen so far, there's no way to create adequate parking for all the folks who will come. So when you invite the cars, you will bring more cars than you can accommodate. If you don't invite the cars, you'll encourage people to come via other mechanisms that are very accessible. Alex and then Jacqueline.
Yeah, I just want to add also, the more connections we have, the easier it is to access trails where you would otherwise have to drive a car to park, because you can cut off 2 miles of getting around to the backside of a hill if you can just walk 100 yards onto the trail.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna
Jacqueline.
say the exact same thing, but I think the more you can connect to not only our Portola Valley trails, but provide opportunities to connect to foothills, provide opportunities that I realize right now there's not a clear connection to Arrastradero, but there have been people looking into ways to do that. And if you can provide that possibility at least, like, which would be similar to saying connecting Los Francos, but that's just inviting less cars, because if you can come from foothills, if you can come from Arrastradero, you can come from other town trails, then you don't need to drive there.
But has Hawthorne discussed the parking at all? And what's wrong with putting the parking right on the Hawthorne property? Is that any consideration, or that they're not at that stage yet?
So it is being considered. Let's come back to that with the Hawthorne's parking impact. So item B, we'll come back to that. Okay, you got to go.
And to Jacqueline's point, real quick, the Trails and Paths element diagram actually shows some of those interconnections into Rastradero, into other trail systems besides the town. So there was a lot of foresight into how we accomplish exactly what you're talking about. And I think this proposal should include recommendations that hopefully find a way to get those things implemented.
So
if at all possible.
Yeah. So I think Howard has put up the Trails and Paths element here. Howard, if you can use your mouse, your pointer is right near in the area of importance right here. So that Howard is tracing the Hawthorne's area, and you can see those dashed lines in there are recommendations for the trails. So you've got two portions connecting Alpine and Los Trancos Road, and then you have that connection into Sweet Springs, again, connecting right at Pomponio, which is a road in the ranch right there. So that's the Trails and Paths recommendation. And again, this is accessible on the town website. PortolaValley.net has the Trails and Paths element, and this is proposal for lots of trails here. And you can see over on the right-hand side of the document, two of the routes that Jacqueline was just referencing around connections. One would be, the northern ones would be connections into Arrastradero Preserve, and then the southern one would be a connection into Foothills Park. So topic for another day though. Okay, so I think we're centering on in favor of connections. We have not talked about trail use though, and what we would like to see for the trails that MidPen puts in. We've talked a lot about multi-use. You know, we don't have nearly enough multi-use trails in the town for a variety of reasons that we don't need to rehash today, but it's just a fact that we don't have as many multi-use as lots of folks would like. And so I'm not sure why the video is not coming to me, but that's fine. So I wanted to put forth that I think our position is that we would like the trails within Hawthorne's to be as multi-use as possible. I'm seeing lots of nodding heads there. And I think given sort of the fitting with the Trails and Paths element, I don't think we're looking for, you know, a extensive network within, you know, I think the recommendation that you just saw from the original Trails and Paths element, I think is consistent with the number of trails we'd like to see. I don't think, is anyone advocating for, putting in more trails, sort of more connections there? I don't see anyone, any hands up or anything. But I think I would summarize our recommendation for the new trails is consistent with the Trails and Paths element, but multi-use.
And not e-bikes.
and not e-bikes. Dave and then Jacqueline, go ahead, and then
Sure. I
Dave.
just wanted just to give context too. I don't know if everyone's like familiar with because I actually wasn't until I went to the last Hawthorne's meeting, but about the Measure AA, which was the 30-year, $300 million general bond that was passed. That was back in 2014. But that was the goal of that. I mean, I'm not going to read all of it because some about is other great things about protecting wildlife habitat, clean water. But one of them was improving new hiking and biking trails. So improving trails, opening more preserves, and providing more opportunities for hiking and biking close to home. And then they also lay out their 25, this is on the open space website, but their 25 like priorities. And when it comes to Windy Hill and Hawthorns, it specifically calls out to improve trails, complete pond facilities, increase multi-use trails, study possible increased dog use, open the Hawthorns area, develop trails that connect to Portola Valley and to Palo Alto trails. So I just wanted to like call out that it's not like us proposing.
We're
like,
not radicals.
This should be just in line with what has already been put out there.
I think it will be good for us to reference that in our submission, because I'm guessing that many of the committee members, or maybe even folks on the board, may not be aware of this, and so I think making that connection is really important in our proposal. So thank you for that, Dave.
All right, so I would encourage the committee to also include language specific to trail surfacing. One of my concerns with Mid-Penn building habits in the last couple of years is there's been increased motion towards hardened surfaces, right? Specifically heavy gravel rock deposits as well as cementatious soil that gets laid over trail surfaces. This has not been historically Mid-Penn's practice, but has been on the increase. Some combination of trying to harden surfaces against increased trail usage, and I think frankly, behind the scenes, like cost cutting and just kind of expedience, right? So if you consider within our sphere of influence, the dirt alpine rebuild recently, which I think is wildly unpopular, having made it quite a bit wider and quite a bit harder and an unpleasant surface to travel for trail users. There is every probability that left to their own devices, Mid-Penn will continue to build hard surfaces, asphalt surfaces, gravel surfaces, instead of the natural surfaces that are characteristic with the kind of a town beautification guidelines and keeping it an open space. It is quite possible to build erosion resistant surfaces while using the existing soils with best trail practices. This is maybe in accordance with the Sweet Springs conversation. So I would encourage the committee to strongly suggest using natural surface trails as specific language for the entirety of the Hawthorne Trail.
Thank you, Dave. There's some hands up, is that right? Okay, Karen first, and then we'll go to Caroline after that.
Hi, yeah, this is Karen Askey. And one of the things that I think you either love it or hate it is there's a concept of having an area for dogs off leash. And Mid-Penn currently has several areas, the closest one being Pulgus Ridge, where you go to a specific area within Pulgus Ridge and they have a dogs off leash trail. And I'm going to speak with my Parks and Rec hat, which is we are struggling to find an appropriate space for off leash dog park. And we have a lot of unhappy people seeing dogs running over the town center and maybe things not getting cleaned up after them and such, and a desire to have that. So one of the things I would ask when we talk about multi-use is asking Mid-Penn to consider an area, obviously, where dogs could be off leash on a trail. At Pulgus Ridge, it's done with a split rail fence. It's not like a big 8-foot fence kind of thing. Some other things, we have an opportunity to perhaps have some things that we don't necessarily have on our wonderful almost 40 miles of trails, which is something that might be more inclusive access. People that maybe in wheelchairs could be there, and some sort of interpretive trail where you can see maybe a school field trip walking down there. And I know we've talked about whether or not it would make sense and it would be on the forefront of things, is maybe there's a bikes only area that could cater to that and maybe decrease the amount of parking there. So I'm just going to throw those out. The dogs one is from my Parks and Rec hat and personal, but also the ones are more just from my resident side. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. Caroline? You are still muted.
Can you hear?
Yep, go
Great.
ahead.
Can you hear me now? Thank you.
Yes.
There's an important subject here brought up, and that is safety. Several of your committee members have brought it up. As you know, there was a grand jury report that is trying to improve bike safety in San Mateo County. Unfortunately, our town mayor has issued a draft letter. At this point, I was out of town. It was presented last week on the 27th. And I was out of town at this time. I don't know if it went through or not, but I do not agree with the findings. We do have the data. Unfortunately, the data from consultants and from law enforcement does not correspond to what the residents have provided. We have pictures, we have sites, you know, for years.
I'm sorry,
we have.
Caroline, I'm not following. What is this in regards to?
You should read the letter that was sent by our town council, and I don't know if it was sent. There was a draft in response to the grand jury of San Mateo that is trying to make our roads safer for other transportation other than cars. And so that was, you should look at it. It was presented at the town council on the 27th of September.
Okay.
I don't know if it went through. It is important.
Okay,
It's
so
important.
there's a grand jury that's been convened to look at road safety. Is that what you're pointing us towards?
Yep.
I think
The grand jury report was released on July 10th, 2023. The bike PPTS has not reviewed it yet. There was an expected response due by October 10th, and so the town council, it was actually a draft letter by the mayor, was presented on September 27th. I hope we can discuss it. I don't know if it went through or not, but I don't agree with the findings. And basically it is because we do have the data, but the data from.
okay. I would just request maybe an email summary. This is a little probably a fairly complex issue, and just how it connects directly to new trail use would be very helpful. If you could just email that to me and Howard, that would be appreciated. Any other hands up? Okay.
No other hands up.
Okay, Gary? Go for it. I think let's go ahead and talk parking. I'll maybe frame it up. We've had a problem with folks parking along our trails, blocking trails. A couple times in the spring, people parking across Alpine Trail. I don't know whether it's a party or what have you, but it's definitely a place where people see that they think that they can park, and it completely blocks access to the trail. I can see this happening on Los Trancos Trail too. And I think I am further encouraged by our Trails and Paths elements to recommend not having parking at the trailhead. There's potentially some, well, I'll leave it at that. I do think I'll reiterate comments I made earlier that I think that parking at trailheads invites cars, and you will never provide enough parking for the number of cars that will potentially come. And so more connections means that you don't need cars. I think points that Jacqueline and Alex have raised here. So I think our proposal needs to encourage Mid-Penn not to bring more cars in and not to encourage more parking. So Gary, with that, I'll over to you.
Thank you, and thanks for accommodating my schedule. I'm very supportive of the idea that more interconnections to the trail system leads to less parking. So the more interconnections we can have, the less parking problem we're going to have. Given the size of the Hawthorns, I just don't want to see parking become out of balance with the actual facilities are there. Again, the more interconnections there are, it's more likely people will walk to the Hawthorns than drive, because it's really not a destination per se, at least not on the scale that Windy Hill is. But if they do have parking internal in Hawthorns, I would ask the committee to consider recommending that it be highly regulated, that it be limited in nature, maybe handicap parking, elderly parking, reservation system, something, because one, they just don't have a lot of space for parking. Two, I don't want to see parking along the scenic corridor against Alpine. I think would be awful. And three, we're going to have a safe routes to school trail along crossing whatever driveway or driveways they put in. And the more people that are turning in there looking for parking and then just turning around and driving right back out just creates more safety issues for that safe routes to school trail. So in a nutshell, I think for those reasons, limiting parking there, making a recommendation that we limit parking there, I would be very supportive of that. And then finally, no parking on trailheads.
Go ahead, Susan. Before Gary goes, actually, can I just jump in before Gary goes? We'll come back to this. I do believe we need to create a subcommittee to draft up our thoughts here so that we can bring this back to our next meeting so that we as a committee can vote on supporting it and putting it forth. I am going to volunteer to lead that subcommittee because I'm fairly deep in this. And so while you're here, I just want to make sure we have as many people who have a chance to join the subcommittee with me. I think we can have a max of 4. Is that right? Someone please correct me. 4. So 3 other people would like to join the subcommittee. Gary, Jacqueline, and Alex. Good.
You might have to make the motion to form the subcommittee first and then pick the people.
I move that we form a subcommittee.
I second.
All in favor? Ellie, are you?
Yes. Sorry,
Okay. Yeah, you're taking that. Okay, so that's unanimous. And then I think the subcommittee will be Gary, Alex, Jacqueline, and myself. She's not here and I didn't do it in time. So, okay. So the subcommittee will be responsible for putting this package together and then bringing it back to us. Thank you, Gary. Gary's departing at.
I'm afraid that I have to leave in about 5 minutes too, so.
Okay.
maybe we could-
Okay, I can take over for notes or.
And I was just going to say something
ahead,
really
Susan.
quickly.
Yeah, go Susan.
To Gary's point, I very much agree with him. And I think that it's not, I don't know if anybody has toured the Hawthorns yet. I think that it's going to be a place where people are going to want to go in the very beginning, but I just don't see it as a destination at all. I think that we're getting, people are getting really upset about something that maybe won't even be a destination. I know I was reading some of the public comments and I actually came across something that said poison oak presents a hazard to the public. So people are kind of like all over the place in terms of, being frightened of this. And as I said, I just think that people are going to still want to go to Windy Hill and other places.
Yes, thank you.
You didn't mention also the traffic on Willowbrook. We take a brunt of
Yes.
a lot of traffic. And also talking about traffic on the Portola Road, there's a sign that says you can park at the town center. So you're talking about parking somewhere else and walking. Many people will park right where the easiest, the quickest way. Not everybody, but many people will. I mean, the town center's parking is usually quiet and it's all along Portola Road. So
There were some wonderful connections suggested in the trails and paths elements that make, they could happen between the town center and Windy Hill, but we'll leave those for another day.
I'd
Karen?
like to make a comment. I don't think this is going to be a high destination tourist attraction like Windy Hill, but you must consider if you open it to dogs, you open it to a dog park, or even just dogs, you're going to get a lot of people out of town, people from Ladera, people from Palo Alto. It's going to be like a Rastadero Preserve. And if you've ever noticed, Rastadero Preserve had to expand their parking. And a lot of people that go to Rastadero are just dog walkers. So those people are going to park somewhere. And if you don't want to build a parking lot that is really open, they're going to be parking on Alpine Road, Nathor, Sweet Spring, wherever they can go because they can walk their dog there. So, even idealistically, people are going to ride their bike. That's not going to happen. We're not yet there. We don't have that infrastructure. People don't have and especially if you prohibit e-bikes, they're not that, if you open to dogs, you just got to, I think, try not to be too idealistic and be realistic. We don't want another situation where we have another Willowbrook parking lot situation in town.
Yeah.
But it's hard to predict the future. And one suggestion that I've asked for when Midpen is we build a parking lot to a reasonable guess. But if we have problems, we know where we're going to expand to it. So don't overbuild, but have something say, I'll just throw out a number for fun. I don't know if it's the right number, 20 cars. And that will be fine. But then if for whatever unpredicted reason, it becomes super popular, then we quickly know we can have a permit to expand it to 30 or whatever those numbers are to try to mitigate it. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be like Windy Hill, but I don't want to have no parking. And then we know people will park at the trailheads if we have no parking.
Thank you for sharing that. I do think you introduce an interesting tension between promoting use of dogs and that attract cars, ironically. Howard?
We have Christy Corley with her hand raised.
Go ahead, Christy.
Yes, when I was on the tour, one of the leaders, there's 3 of them, said, well, just beware if you vote for everything for this park, it will increase the number of people. And we can look at, and that means dogs and, everything, more trails, more parking lots, so on. So I hadn't thought about it that way. But look at Rastadero. Yeah, Rastadero added parking, but so did Rancho San Antonio, quite a bit of parking. So when I look at this trail that's only 1.2 miles, you can see at the lower areas along Alpine Road, they are talking about 20 on each side of the driveway. So you can see the trail goes down in those areas so they can get off the parking lot. And then if they add the 3rd parking lot, let's just play this out, then that would be, say, well, my vote would always be over the hill and not along Alpine Road if we had to do it. I don't think we need to see 40 cars, 20 on each side of the driveway on Alpine Road. I mean, it would be right. It wouldn't be like Windy Hill. It would be where you'd see all 20 and then you'd see all 20. Or you could go up and over the hill to the tour parking area now, and that's 10 on one side and 10 on the other side. And they predicted they can get 40 in there. So we already know that. That's probably the plan that's coming out, but I don't know. That's what they were talking about.
Yeah. Thank you, Christy. I think this just further underscores the need for us to bring the trails and paths element from the plan into this conversation with Midpen, because I think that can guide us really effectively here. Go ahead, Howard. Is there anyone else, or you?
I was just wondering if I could speak to some historical things from, I just want to mention, if that's okay, concerning the old memo that we submitted back in 2014 to Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space that I believe went to the Trails Committee at that time.
Yeah. Can I just close out? Were there any other ideas for connections or new trail use thoughts that people?
I know it's not the easiest, but getting back to more connections, whatever adjustments could be made. There's so much parking behind Roberts and the hardware store, like
It doesn't
You-
get used.
it doesn't get used, and it's directly across the street from this trail system. So that is something to pretend, like, how can we promote that as alternative parking?
But isn't that
potentially?
private property?
I don't know.
And
Yeah.
that new development that's
But-
going in next door.
True, it's just an idea.
Yeah.
There's a ton of real estate for cars right across the street.
Yeah, that's that is useful to point out. Okay. I think we can close off on items I through IV. We've talked about parking. We've talked about the subcommittee. Howard, go ahead and,
Okay. It's just so good to hear a lot of the comments from the public and committee too. And I was going to review some of the same things too, but I just wanted to bring in light, back in 2014, the town submitted to the town council and sent to the MROSD a letter, and I believe that was blessed by the Trails Committee at the time. So I just wanted to, this is available information, so that if the current Trails Committee can maybe, I would advise taking a look at it, because the old Trails Committee assembled this when back in 2014. And I heard some things that, about the cyclone fence. I recall the committee talking about some scenic corridor issues and concerns with the cyclone fence. I also recall there was a lot of trying to get the trail away from traffic, moving it in. And so that was one of the reasons is the trail experience for some of the equestrians by moving it inward. So I would encourage, there's a lot of information on the MRSD website. And then also if you want me to circulate the old memo from 2014, I can send it to the chair and the chair can circulate that. I think it's important to know. And at that time, the drawing was very conceptual, but it was moving the trail in and proposing a multi-use trail with a natural surface that meandered. And I do hear the concept of leaving the existing trail too. You could do that. I know that the proposal contained requestment of an easement. I did appreciate Gary bringing up the general plan, because typically when the submitted plan from MRSD comes in, there's going to be a reference to the general plan and the scenic corridor. The other impacts that we're going to look at, and I heard in this discussion, is the traffic impacts. And I'm not just talking about cars, just pedestrians, equestrians on both Alpine and on the backside of Horseshoe Bend too. So those are some of the things. In addition, I know the BPTS off topic is, traffic signs, no parking signs, overflow parking onto the residential streets is something that we're going to look into, also. So that's all I have. And once again, these are just reminders. And I already it was already good to hear a lot of the committee had these same thoughts already. So thank you.
Oh, did you say this is on MidPen website?
Where can we access the letter? I think it's a question.
So the letter is on our website, but it's going to be in the Trails minutes and the council minutes. But what the best thing to do is if I email it to you,
yeah,
and if you can distribute it, that's the best.
Yeah, we'll get it sent out. I think we can get a lot of material sent out. Can you email me that Windy Hill link? Yeah. Okay. This has been a great discussion. We are 89 minutes in.
Add to that, I've today asked for a public comment folder on MidPenn's site where we can just read everything, because I read everything recently on the 245-page document, and I only saw 3 letters regarding Hawthorns. They don't go back to 2014, and they don't. So if you could add that to your comments, that we want that, so we can read what other residents are writing.
Yeah, I think we can request that. Karen, maybe we can do that through the committees of committees. I think that's all for trails today. Unless
Can I
there's
just
any-
ask one question?
Yeah.
When does this review process finish? In another 2 years?
I don't believe anyone has said. So Helen, can you speak into the microphone just for our minutes purposes.
Public Access Working Group is supposed to report to the next level up review within MidPen in June next year. However, then there's about another 2-3 year process of.
So my next question is, I don't want to be the devil's advocate. This is regarding safe routes to school. When is that flashing beacon going to come in?
Let's table that for next week.
Would it come in before?
It ought to come in before, but that we'll talk about that next week at our regularly scheduled meeting. I don't know that there are specific timelines that have been set in stone for this. So can I get a motion?
I make a motion.
Oh, can I just, sorry.
Go ahead, Karen.
I just wanted to review the dates. I know Helen said next June, but just specifically, if you guys want to jot this down, there's the meeting with POG on October 26th that will talk about, ideally, they want to have a working concept in place by the end of that meeting. Then on December 16th, there's a site tour to go over that working concept. On February 29th of 2024, they hope to have the final concept, which would then go to the MidPen PR and then the board for approval, and then it'll come to the town, to the planning commission and the town council for their approval. So February 29th is when they hope to have their concept that could be board approved by MidPen, just FYI.
Great.
Thanks.
October 26th is the operative date for us right now. It's the date that we need to hit. And so that's why I'm trying to keep us focused for now. Can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, second? Okay, we are closed. It is 10:31 a.m. Thank you all for coming.